Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session here at the backyard. Hindsight is 2020. Firstly, I'd like to introduce you to Malachy here, and I'm going to ask Malachy to tell you a little bit about himself.
Thanks, Drew. Great to be here with you in Blass another year. My name is Malachy O'Connor. I'm a consultant in the food industry. All of my background is in retail. I did food science, and then I've worked for nearly all the supermarkets in a buying or a marketing role. My last role was in Tesco. I was a category director in Tesco Ireland for a couple of years, and a buying director in Aldi before that. And I have a consultancy business now where I work with primarily food and drink manufacturers on their strategic needs, and then also on their commercial training and capability development. So I do lots of negotiation skills training and sales training and strategy development. So and that's focused at medium and large food and drink businesses. I have a couple of different groups that I work with, but we'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much. The industry we're in has been quite challenged in the last couple of years. Like, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, and we've had major financial issues and stresses on businesses in the last year or so with commodity pricing. Mm-hmm. You know, that has obviously put a lot of pressure on a lot of business. Have you found that out there when you've been talking to businesses?
Oh, absolutely. I tell you what was more concerning was that the concern wasn't evident soon enough. Because from like June of 2020, you could see prices going up. I think the OPEC nations capped the oil production, therefore energy prices went up, and everything was thrown out of kilter because of supply chains and pandemic, and prices were going up, but it wasn't on enough people's radars.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of, it was a really strange time, because I knew that food producers were experiencing inward inflation from their suppliers and all of their cost inputs, but they weren't necessarily getting any cost increases from their customers.
Yeah.
And so in some cases it was because they weren't asking. So.
Yeah, and you must have seen that there in the industry then. Like, you know, that was a lot of pressure on maybe smaller, medium-sized businesses, where you have individuals within them businesses trying to do everything themselves. Have you found that yourself?
Yeah, very definitely. And do you know what? It's not even just small businesses. There's plenty of medium and large businesses where there's a black hole of unknowns. Where on paper you should be making money, but in actuality you're not. Yeah. And unless you're on top of that as an owner or a leader, then things can definitely go wrong, and you can't do everything. No. So you have to be able to delegate stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously when you're trying to delegate, you need a very good team around you, and you need to start building good teams. How would you go about that, or in that side, the management side?
It depends. It depends where you're at in your evolution as a business.
Yeah.
And what was interesting, because I've had, what prompted this session was I was preparing for something completely different about a year ago, was going down through my contact list and identified a bunch of companies that had very bright futures, but who had came crashing down. So you hear all the success stories and victory from the jaws of defeat, but these were definitely businesses that are no longer trading. And I went down through the list, and there's some really surprising people on there and businesses, because they had great supports.
Yes.
So I reached out to them and tried to find out, well, where did it go wrong? And one of the areas that it goes wrong is where businesses at all levels of evolution, you've got a founder or a leader who tries to do everything themselves, and you can't.
No.
You can't. So even if you're one or two people in a startup, you have to be able to identify what are the key business activities that are going to help deliver your business plan or your strategy, and have a plan for all of those. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. If you can break your business into all the different bits, all the different key activities, and then you look at that and think, well, I have to do all of those things for this to be a functional business, but I can't do all of them, so I need a plan. So I need to outsource, or I need to bring in a service provider, or I need to hire, or I need a different business model, because I can't do all of those things and then produce, so maybe I need to get somebody else to produce it.
Yeah.
So, but when you put it on a page like a jigsaw puzzle, then you start to get clarity about the size of the challenge.
And I think, like, I'm from Invest.NI, and we work with a lot of small, medium and large businesses as well. And we see the same thing up there in the north as well with the small business. And I think at some stage, they can't see the wood for the trees. They get themselves in a hole. And like, there's so much support available to these small businesses out there, through Board Bay, through Invest.NI and ourselves, for people like you to come in and actually help them out. So there's a lot of help out there. But with a challenging time, the markets are challenging at the moment as well. How does a business actually stay relevant at the minute? How do you keep a brand relevant at the moment?
It has to be part of your plan. So and again, it depends on the stage you're at. If you're a startup or if you've established a business that's turning over a reasonable turnover, but then you're thinking about the next stage. The problem is when you're not thinking about the next stage. If you want to stay relevant and if you want to have a bright future, then you need to plan for that. And that requires you to have some kind of a form of an ambition, give yourself the permission really to kind of dream, some kind of a dream, and then make a plan for how you might get there from where you are right now. Because if you don't do that, and if you don't do it in time, then all of your competitors will do it. Yeah. And then it's kind of too late then.
Yeah, because we see a lot of it, like talking to a lot of business as well, when we do a lot of the funding and stuff like that there, and you're asking about plans, and have you got a 3-year plan, have you got a 5-year plan? Because I know the business I worked previously, we worked on 5-year plans, but you're asking the question, and some of them are looking very blankly, and the plan is, well, I'm planning for tomorrow. And can I ask the audience, producers out here, manufacturers, how many of you have a 3-year or 5-year plan for your business? Put your hands up.
It's probably more.
Yeah.
They're being shy.
Yeah, just very shy about it.
Yeah.
But it's so, you need it for so strategic that you do need to have that plan to know where you're going. Yeah. How do you know where you're going?
Well, come here. There's loads of great businesses out there. That I've dealt with as a buyer, kind of supplier relationship, or as a consultant, where they're my clients, and they've got a great legacy of growth. They could be turning over multiple tens of millions.
Yes.
But it's kind of evolved.
Yeah.
Couldn't look back and say that was the strategic direction we were taking it in. The kind of opportunities arise and you take advantage of them, and that's fine. But the problem then is that if a business isn't in the habit of taking stock and making plans to develop their business, then it's too reactive. And then when they hit a bump in the road, if something changes like a pandemic or an inflation crisis, and the business isn't in the habit and hasn't developed the skills to be able to take stock and think strategically and act strategically.
Like, I know you spoke to a lot of business before this interview and interviewed a lot of business to get some information out there.
Yeah.
Did you ever get any feedback that some of them felt that they were being pushed in the wrong direction?
Especially the startups. Yeah, very definitely. Especially the startups because I mean, some of the closing remarks that I had for my top 10 things that where it all went wrong. The last one was you need a bit of luck, and it helps if you have money, connections, and good advice. But I don't say that glibly. But when you're a startup, sorry, Drew, remind me, what was the question again?
Been pushed in the wrong direction.
So when you're a startup and you don't have that advice, and maybe not those connections, then you can take advice.
Yes.
And it can push you in the wrong direction. So if you're not clear about where you want to go, you can be led along. You can find yourself getting pulled into some program for this or some grant-assisted program for that. And if that's not aligned to where you want to go, then you could be engaging in activities that aren't going to get you there.
Yeah.
And then that can have a tumbling effect. I spoke to some companies who approached maybe a state support to access money to help develop their business, ended up on a retailer development program, but it didn't necessarily suit their product. Their product maybe was pitched at a more premium customer, therefore retail and high volume wasn't right for them. Yeah. But they got sucked into it, and that was
because they felt the need to do it.
Yeah.
They felt and they
didn't know any better. But that was essentially where they perished. That was where things started to go wrong because they were trying to satisfy retailer needs rather than thinking about here's a product, here's my target customer, here's where they buy and consume this product, so let me put all my resources in that direction.
And maybe sometimes they feel, because I'm trying to get state aid here, I feel I have to go and do this program because the provider's providing it, I better go and do it. And it could be grocery, but they have alcohol, which is a complete different category, different legislation altogether, so maybe they are being totally pushed down the wrong road. Do you ever come across many sort of like, the other challenge I see as small businesses, and I'm going to say it out openly here, is closed minds. They just have a closed mind and they don't listen as well. Have you come across that in your time in the last 20 years?
Well, I mean, every human being has blind spots, like we all do.
Yes.
And when I'm doing strategy consulting, the first step of any project with a client is to pull a project team together that's as diverse as possible. You know, people from different skill sets, and every kind of form of diversity, age, gender, cultural. If you can get different people around the table, not just the different functions of your business, then you'll have a much better outcome, because people have different perspectives and different ways of thinking. So if you can get as much diversity into it, into your thinking as possible, then you'll end up making less mistakes because you'll have less blind spots. I don't think it's so much about people having closed minds. It's just that they don't necessarily have the time to do that kind of engagement.
Yeah. Get that time to sit down and think about things, and a blank space where you can actually open up and go.
Yeah. Now, and here's one actually I came across. Even if you're a small to medium business, you should be thinking about having an advisory board.
Yeah.
Two things. You should be thinking about having an advisory board so that there's people from outside your business with the perspective and the experience to be able to challenge you and provoke you.
Yeah.
Because it's not about having a closed mind. It's just about not knowing what you don't know. And then the other thing is networking. I mean, you've got loads of peers in the industry, like other companies that could be in different categories, so they're not competing with you. So you need to be sharing with each other, because you've all got the same problems. No, and there's no problem that somebody else hasn't fixed already.
Yeah, that's to say, you're probably guaranteed at least 90% of the people in that room will have had the exact same issue you've had.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, what do I do? And they're going, well, here's a solution. Should we have had that a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago? Or ring this person and they'll be able to help you out. Or and you just give them that guidance.
Well, I have a network. I have a supplier network that we come together every month for an hour. There's 14 companies. They don't compete. One of them will have a question. Another person won't have thought about it, so it's kind of a good heads up.
Yeah.
And then another member of the group will say, well, I've solved that already. Yeah. And that's kind of how that dynamic works in those networking groups.
Yeah, and it's really good for, even when you're moving on to the commercial side of the business, and you're looking at the commercials, and you're talking to retailers, and you're sort of saying, maybe the first time you've ever spoke to a retailer, and you're going, what's margins, and what's all these LTA things that they're talking about, or what does this retailer margin? What am I supposed to go in what price? And that's it. So from your buyer perspective side, how do they look at realistic commercials? What should they start to look at? How do they look when they've got their nice bottle of water here and I'm wanting to sell this to you? What should I be looking at in realistic commercials?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, but it's not insurmountable. And you know, at the core of it, what I think is that the cost of something and the value of something are two completely different things. And if you can get your head around that, then you're in a good position to start from. Because if you're dealing with a buyer, they'll want to focus on the cost of it, which will be a bottom-up exercise, which means they'll want to buy it at the lowest possible price. But if you're trying to sell something and make money, you have to think about the value that it adds, the problems that it's solving. So that cost and value relationship is crucially the place to start thinking differently. Because if you just think about it, here's the cost, and there I can make a margin, and I think I'll cover all those other costs, so I can sell it at this price, and then they can sell it at that price, and they'll get their 40 or their 50% margin, and that's a recipe for success. But you could be completely undervaluing your product because you're not clear about the problems that you're solving and the worth that you have.
Yes. And then, obviously, when you're doing that side of the commercials, that's the number side as well. You also want to be looking at that insight side, really driving into the insight, where that product sits in the market, what's the demand as well, which will obviously, that would add to commercials, wouldn't it? Sort of decisions and processes.
See, the insights are, they can be viewed as tricky because, first of all, insights data can cost a lot of money. Like if you're trying to get your hands on a Kantar or a Nielsen report or something like that, then don't do that on your own. You need it, but don't do it on your own, because I know that Invest in I and Board B, both agencies invest in some degree of insight supports, and there's a library of data there that you can access. And even if you can't get the exact thing you're looking for, you might get something close. So being a client company of those agencies is really important, so you can access the insights. Because if you're trying to sell something on the basis that here's a great product and here's a great recipe and people love it and kind of buy my product, you're going nowhere, because that buyer just wants to buy things at the lowest price, and they're not going to tell you what's brilliant about your product, because that'll give you more confidence to ask for a better price. So you need to go in on the basis that I understand your stores and I understand the market. Here's some observations I have. Here's some opportunities that you might be missing currently. And if you list my product, you'll be able to convert those opportunities into sales. And here's what I think it might be worth to you. Here's size of the price. And that's a completely different approach to take. It's about, are you familiar with the business author, Howard Levitt, I think it was. And he said that people don't buy a drill because they need a drill. They buy a drill because they need a hole. So there's a problem to be solved,
Yes,
And
yes.
I think food and drink manufacturers, any business, if they focus on the solution that their proposition is providing, then that's a much more sound foundation for business success.
Yeah. There's an old boss of mine used to say to me, there's no such thing as a problem. It's only a solution you haven't found yet. That's what he drilled into me.
No, but
It's true
seriously,
when you think
the,
about
the
it.
thing about the insights is that you're set up for a conversation with a customer to say, here's an opportunity or a problem. And that might be an opportunity or a problem that customer doesn't even know they have.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, actually, if they're not even aware that they have a problem. Because like, wow,
Yeah.
that's an opportunity. And you're going to help me solve it. Great. Yeah.
Get in first and get in there. I'm going to open the floor up to questions, and I'm just going to ask you one more commercial sort of side of things, and then I'm going to open the floor up just for a couple of questions, and we're going to continue on to the next sort of innovation side. So I've gone into my buyer, ex-retailer, and it's my first time in, and I'm terrified going into them, sort of thinking, and they've given me a deal. How do I know it's a bad deal or a good deal, or, in that aspect, or what should I do? Should I take the deal? Should I not take the deal? If I don't take the deal, will I ever get back in again? So what is a bad deal? What would a bad deal do to your business, or what?
Well, I mean, a bad deal in the early stages of your business evolution, or at any stage of your business evolution, can kill you.
Yes.
Literally, it could be the thing that knocks the business out, and it could be any part of that deal that could be really problematic. First of all, I've said this so many times: food and drink producers get very excited at the prospect of a listing with a national chain. So you're going to get your product nationwide in 150 shops, all of their footfall, all of that volume. It's exactly what we need. In fact, and then they get into kind of stress type thinking, black or white thinking. If I don't get this listing, then the business will fail.
Yeah.
And that, again, that's a place where lots of bad decisions were made, because then they turn into Oliver Twist. Please, sir, can I get a listing? And they're so grateful for the opportunity that they give everything away and they don't question it.
Yeah.
And when I say give everything away, I mean they don't agree a cost price for the product that is commercially viable for them, that's enough to cover all of the other investments that they don't see coming, like the rebates and the funding promotional margins 12 times a year, and maybe doing packaging development that's specific for that customer. There's all these things that are going to come at you, and if you haven't built that into your costs, then you're sunk.
Yes. The other side of that looks at, if you're not making any money in 10-store deal and they move you to 100 stores, you're still making no money. You're even making less money.
Yeah.
And you're going to be out on that one. Would anybody like to ask any questions from the floor? Yes.
I just wonder, who would you say to get on your advisory board? You mentioned having. Oh, sorry. You mentioned having an advisory board, and what kind of a diversity to the board. So, what would you say? A person like this, like a list of what kind of people?
Yeah. Okay. So again, the answer to that question will depend on where you're at in your evolution and what you need to get to the next stage. If you're a startup with one person, your advisory board could be the mentors that you access through the local enterprise office or through Enterprise Ireland or something like that. If you're not a startup, if you've already got to maybe 500,000 or $1 million turnover, then you should be thinking about, okay, well, if I'm going to grow this business and stay relevant into the future, I need a strategy plan to get there. Within that strategy plan, there might be 4 or 5 kind of areas that I need to focus on, and that's where I need the advice. So if you identify in your planning that logistics is a real problem for us, I've got everything else right, but I can't get the route to market sorted, then you need to get somebody who knows about logistics, who knows about route to market. And it really is, it's about targeting the advice to the need, and the need will depend on where you're at in your evolution.
Is there anybody else in the room?
Yeah, sorry, just on the advisory board. It seems like a stupid question, but how do you engage with, so say you're sort of at that 500,000 turnover, you have a strategic plan where you want to get to, you're missing pillars within your business. Is it as easy as just emailing them? Is there a commercial agreement normally with advisors, or how does that normally work?
Yeah, so in my experience, people are really willing to share their help and their experience. I mean, too often people don't ask for help. That's the problem. So, and when you do ask for help, the person who you're asking, they get a little ego boost, because it's quite complimentary to, they value my advice. Okay, so I'm going to give them some advice. Most of the time that can be for free. Could be for free, depending on where you're at. You could access people who have some experience and might be willing to do it for free for a period of time. If you're at a different level, then maybe you could leverage it against some share options or something like that. But it doesn't need to kill you. The first step is actually to identify a few people you'd like to Yeah, you just ask them. And I mean, LinkedIn is amazing for that. Just on a B2B basis. You know, God, I'd like to be in that person's company. Who's in our shared network? Who can introduce me to that person?
In your experience, these guys who come from outside your network, they might be just somebody you see at a show or just engaged.
It could be. It could be anybody. You should be kind of targeted about who you want to talk to, because this is the kind of advice I need at this stage to get me to that next level. So don't be scattergun about it. Yeah.
You'll
Just ask.
You probably also find some of these people may have retired, and they're looking for something to do, and they're just more than willing to offer you as much help as they can, and they've that maybe 30, 40 years experience that you don't have, and they're going, absolutely, I'd love to do that, no bother. And it could be a Teams call, or you can use, because you don't have to do a lot of traveling, everything's in Teams. One of the other things I'm going to say to you about in terms of the commercials, I come from an account management background on this side. When you go in, remember to always ask for something back. If they want something, then you ask for something back, because you find too many small companies and artisans, they're terrified to ask. And the buyers are sitting there going, well, we expected you to ask, but we didn't, so I'm not going to give you anything.
When I do the training courses, Drew,
Yeah.
people say, oh, I didn't know I could ask for that.
Oh,
You ask for anything. ask for everything, actually. Have a big, long shopping list of things
Yeah.
you can ask for.
because the old saying we used to stick with in business was, if you want something, you've got to give something. And that was how we managed when I went into a buyer. Well, if you want Malachy, what are you giving me in return?
Yeah.
And know your numbers on the account manager side. Know your numbers inside out before you go into a retailer. Plan, and even plan again on that side. Because if you know your numbers, then you know what they ask for as well.
Yeah.
On that side, you know what you can give to get.
You can't commit to giving something if you haven't costed it.
No.
And you should never be in the habit of giving something if you're not getting something to enable it. So here's a mantra for all of you to remember, actually: if you, then I. And you put this to practice this weekend with your kids, if you have any. If they ask you for something, you say, if you can do this, then I will do what you're asking me for. So that's a practice, that's a mantra you need to get into. If you, then I. Because if you don't, then you'll be given stuff and they'll just keep on asking.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so I'm going to move on to another topic on the side now, sort of away from commercial a wee bit. But the one thing I have found over the years of working with small businesses and artisans and that there, you love to innovate, and continue to innovate as well. So, but innovation costs money.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's huge cost to innovation.
Yeah, and again, from the companies that I spoke to in the weeks leading up to this, again, it's very dependent. It's proportional to where you're at in your business. You might think, well, they're turning over 20 million a year. Of course, they can afford to do a project with that retailer to develop 10 private label SKUs or whatever. But you have to be clear about what you're getting into. So here's a scenario. You've got a great product. You're pitching to a retailer, or maybe they've contacted you. It's not quite what they're after. So how many stages of sampling, preparing samples, tweaking the recipe, getting it down to their head office, and getting the feedback, doing another tweak. How many times does that need to happen before you start looking at the price of the ingredients, the deliveries, the time?
Time of
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah, and then and really and truly, you should have just said to them, the best way for us to trial this is to take the product that I currently have.
Yeah.
And then we'll build on that, because if I'm not making money from this relationship right now, then I can't invest in this relationship. And that's maybe for kind of startup artisans who might find themselves pulled into, I don't know, maybe kind of premium type projects.
Yeah.
But if you're at another level, I spoke to a company who had a fantastic opportunity with a big retailer. I think there was like 20 SKUs. It was like a category, like a really strategic category takeover, and
Yeah.
it was all going to this one supplier. And they had a successful legacy of making money and doing great product. But this project started, and it was going to be 9 months before they were on shelf. And because of the asks of the retailer, they had certain ingredients and packaging and statements that they needed to make, and sustainability commitments that needed to be built in, and it all added cost.
Yeah.
And to the extent that it was going to cost, I think they quoted me like 35K per SKU. And that's nine months you have to carry that. And then you make your first delivery, and it could be 90 days before you get paid. So your payment terms then kick in
yeah.
here. And then even if you've planned for that, if anything else goes wrong, at
Yeah.
that time, you're really exposed.
Yeah, and that the payment terms is a whole different conversation, really. But you've just hit I want to come on to that there. And the other side of innovation as well, that you find out what the hidden costs are, because it's not all about the product development. It's not all about your time as well. Because all of a sudden, you go to launch a product, and they go, well, here's your bill for artwork, here's your bill for plates, and all that there, and all of a sudden you're sitting there going, what? I have another 5, 6, 10,000 pounds.
And the legal checks, make sure the label's okay, and then photography.
Artwork, you pay for the artwork, the samples for it. So there's all those.
Oh, and then the packaging quantity as well. For you to be able to get a decent price on packaging, you might have to order 10,000 units. But then the forecast, if the forecast isn't right, it could take you 10 years to sell those 10,000 units. So.
And you only get 6 months on the contract of holding 6 months of packaging.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you're out an absolute fortune. And the other thing with artisans we always find is, this water was my granny's recipe, and it's brilliant. I love this water, and she loved it. And we did trial it in the family, and all my friends said it was brilliant.
Yeah.
So when do you critique the concept? When do you start looking at that and critiquing it? How do you do that? What do you do?
It's a real frustration. Okay, so if you just think from a taxpayer's point of view, there are fantastic supports for companies at all levels of their evolution. Innovation grants, priming funds, HPSU, New Frontiers. There's just FoodWorks. There's fantastic supports that are there. But if you haven't really critiqued the concept right at the start, you could waste a lot of your time. The project may not succeed, and then you've wasted a load of taxpayers' money as well. So I would say, as early as possible, you need to do research that doesn't just confirm what you want to hear, that it is a great product. Because everybody tells you it's a great product. Nobody's going to tell you it's rubbish.
Yeah.
Or that it's a great product, but actually the format's completely wrong.
Yeah.
Because that bottle doesn't have any lid, Drew. How am I going to... It's not going to go through the supply chain with a lid, is it? Nobody will tell you that at a festival when they're all glugging the water and telling you it's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have to really, really critique the concept in every aspect, not just the recipe and how it tastes, but how it's going to move through a supply chain. Is it the right packaging format? Will people buy it at the price that it ends up at when everybody's margin is and all the costs are built in? So that really, really critical analysis early enough can save an awful lot of pain. Can give you a heads up actually that you need to change something. Some of the suppliers I spoke to over the last few weeks, that was the nail. But it was 3 years before their business actually ceased. But 3 years before that, they made a decision on a concept. Mm-hmm. It was a packaging concept that was wrong.
Yeah.
It took 3 years for that to play out.
But we come back to what we spoke about at the very first minute here, planning.
Yeah.
It always comes back to that planning, doesn't it? Because if you do your research, like, as you say, like, a bottle of water here, like, what category am I going into? Am I going for families? Am I going for single people? Or am I going with sports? What category? So the research, yet again, we come back to, the research is out there to know what category you want to go into. Mm. You need to be clear in that concept as well of where you're going. Or you put a family pack out, does it work? So it does. I'm going to ask another question about...
Sorry, just to pick up on that, one of the most fruitful things you can do is go shopping. Drew introduced me to a company a few weeks ago, and the one thing we did was spend a day together in stores. We met in Newry so that we could visit all the supermarkets in the north, so you pick up the UK business. Then we nipped down to Dundalk and we could visit all the supermarkets there, so you're picking up the ROI business.
Yes. How many people in here who own brands, how many times have you been in store recently? 4 or 5? To look at your brands. Why would you not do that? Why would you not go into store and look at your brands, but then you walk into a retailer and you try to sell a brand to the retailer, and you have
time consuming though. It's time consuming for everybody. But what we learned from that day, because I knew that the product that company had, we were able to go to stores and see, well, who's buying it?
But is it?
You can stand at the end of the aisle and see how people are shopping.
But is it time consuming? Because
it's relatively time consuming if you're trying to spin all the other plates, which goes back to the other piece, which is that you can't do everything.
No, but I'm happy to spend my time in my kitchen developing a new product.
Yeah.
So why would you not go out? You have to go out. I'm going to ask, sort of, we're nearly getting close to the very end here now, just on, should your business go after grants? Is that sort of, should you go looking for grants when you're a startup to try and get your business off the ground?
Yeah, and again, it's not just for startups. There are fantastic supports that are there at different stages of a business's evolution, wherever you want to get to, wherever you're starting from, the supports, lots of supports are there. What I'm frustrated by, though, is when businesses go after the support because the support is there, not because that's what they need.
Yeah.
So they get engaged in a program that sucks their time and their focus, and there may be some money and support that comes from it, but it's not what they necessarily needed then. So there was 2 things that came out from the interviews I did over the last couple of weeks. Supports that are there on the basis of, and this is taxpayer money, so you can understand the point of view. They want to give you money so that you can create employment, and they want to give you money so that you can develop export markets. And that's what they want. But what if actually you need to prove the concept and exploit all of the local opportunities for a couple of years. But then you don't access the money necessarily. But that's what you need to do.
And grant funding is not money up front. You have to spend and claim back, so it's like an expense. So you actually have to have money in the
And
first
if it
place.
doesn't work out, you have to pay it back as well.
Yeah, but there's innovation vouchers which are free. Which they are free to get £5,000 innovation voucher. I don't know what it is in the south here, the innovation voucher.
5K as well, I think, yeah.
£5,000. Like, why would you not? That is the perfect opportunity to look at your concept, use one of the big institutes, like we can use Coleraine or Loughrea or Queen's, to actually run a taste panel on you, to get the proper feedback for someone to tell me, Drew, you need to put a cork in that, and the water doesn't taste great, and I would rather have an orange flavour. But there's all that out there as well, and you should be applying for that there. I'm going to just finish up here, Malachy.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd just like to add before we go?
Yeah, okay, so there was one last thing, which is, and it comes out from the negotiation skills training I do.
Yes.
And seeing the list of companies that where it did go wrong, and sometimes the reason is because they didn't ask for what they needed.
Yes.
So over the last 2 years, they didn't ask for the cost increase that they needed, because they talked themselves out of it. They thought, well, there's no way I'm going to get that. So they just don't ask. But it's not the buyer's job to pay you a fair price. You have to negotiate for what you need.
Yeah.
A buyer will look after their own business. I was that buyer for 20 years, and it doesn't mean I was ruthlessly trying to mug every supplier that came into me. But I have to look after my business's priorities. You have to do the same.
And I think if to sum this up here, like, it comes back to what we did. I used to plan and plan and plan. And I think if you put planning in place and go through your processes of planning and a strategy for the future, and people always say, I don't have time. Don't have time. Poor time management. Time is constant. Time never changes. The only thing that can change is you and how you manage the time that you've got. I think that's how I'd like to finish. Just so manage your own time, manage it properly, and take time out and reflect and move on.
Super.
Thank you.
Okay.